Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The Maw of Dominance was not, despite its rather theatrical name, a particularly welcoming place. It was a warship first, a training academy second, and a functioning ecosystem of teenage aggression third. Somewhere around fourth or fifth on that list might have been habitable for species that preferred not to be constantly evaluated as either predator or prey. But that was being generous. Rosalie stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately understood why the Galactic Council had classified this assignment as hazard pay eligible. The docking bay smelled like wet fur, ozone, and what she could only describe as competitive musk. Somewhere in the distance, something roared. Something else answered with a screech that made her teeth ache. "Wonderful," she muttered, adjusting the strap of her supply bag. Just wonderful. A hulking alien with too many teeth and not enough lips approached her. Its uniform identified it as dock security, though Rosalie suspected the uniform was mostly decorative. This species clearly didn't need help looking intimidating. "You are the human liaison?" it growled, each word sounding like gravel in a blender. "That's what my assignment says," Rosalie replied, pulling out her data pad, though the official title is Cultural Exchange Coordinator, which is bureaucrat speak for babysitter nobody else wanted to deal with. The security officer blinked slowly, processing either her words or her audacity. Probably both. "Deck 9, Section 12. Your charges are waiting." The way it said charges made them sound like unexploded ordnance. "Good luck, human." "Yeah, I'm sure I'll need it," Rosalie said, shouldering past and following the illuminated path on her datapad. The corridors of the Maw of Dominance were wide, tall, and designed for species that measured intimidation in square footage. Everything was gunmetal gray or deep crimson, lit by strips of harsh white light that created dramatic shadows. Very dramatic. Almost melodramatic, really. Rosalie suspected whoever designed this ship had watched too many predator species action vids. She passed several clusters of young aliens, all of whom stopped their conversations to watch her walk by. Their eyes tracked her movement with the focus of creatures evaluating prey. Some showed teeth, others flexed claws. One particularly ambitious adolescent let out what was probably meant to be a menacing hiss. Rosalie didn't break stride. She'd dealt with hostile academic review boards. Teenage aliens with attitude problems were, frankly, a lateral move. Deck 9, Section 12, turned out to be a training chamber roughly the size of a shuttle hangar. The space was divided into various zones, climbing structures that looked like metal trees, obstacle courses that seemed designed by someone who hated knees, and what appeared to be a sparring ring surrounded by impact-resistant barriers. In the center of it all stood 3 young aliens, arranged in a loose triangle, formation that screamed, "We practiced this pose." The first was unmistakably the leader. Tall, bipedal, covered in tawny fur with darker spots across the shoulders and arms. The face was disturbingly feline, with golden eyes that tracked Rosalie's approach with unblinking intensity. A mane of darker fur crowned its head and ran down its spine. Raxon, according to her briefing files. Dralthic species. Apex predator, from a world where everything bigger than a bread box wanted to eat you. To his left stood something sleeker, darker. Midnight fur so black it seemed to absorb light, with white markings around the eyes that gave an almost masked appearance. Female, bipedal, moving with the kind of fluid grace that suggested she could go from standing still to lethal in about half a second. Nimsha, Felrathi, her homeworld's dominant predator, naturally. The third member of this welcoming committee was substantial. Growl looked like someone had taken a bear, a wolf, and a particularly aggressive boulder, then combined them into something that could bench press a small spacecraft. Ragath species, covered in thick, dark gray fur with silver patches. Hands that ended in claws the size of combat knives. A face that was mostly jaw. They stared at her. She stared back. "So," Rosalie said, breaking the silence, "which one of you is going to show me where the coffee dispenser is?" "Because I was promised there would be coffee." Raxon's ears flicked forward. "You are the human they sent to observe us?" "That's the official line, yes," Rosalie said, walking past them toward a bench along the wall. She set down her bag and began unpacking. "Though between you and me, I think someone in the Cultural Exchange Department has a sense of humor. Or a grudge. Possibly both." "You do not seem afraid," Nimsha said, her voice quieter than Raxon's but somehow more pointed. "Should I be?" Rosalie pulled out her datapad and a thermos. "The orientation briefing said you were adolescents in a supervised training environment, not a pack of wild animals. Were they wrong? Should I file a safety complaint?" Growl made a sound deep in his chest. It might have been a growl. It might have been confusion. With his species, the two were apparently similar. Raxon stepped forward, drawing himself up to his full height. Which was impressive, honestly. He had at least a foot on Rosalie, and that wasn't counting the mane. "We are not mere adolescents. We are predators, apex hunters from our respective worlds. We have trained since childhood in the arts of the hunt, of dominance, of making speeches," Rosalie interrupted, glancing up from her datapad. "Because that's quite a speech. Do you practice that in the mirror? Or does it just come naturally?" The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded violence. Rosalie had experienced it before, in faculty meetings when someone suggested budget cuts to research funding. Raxon's lips pulled back, revealing an impressive array of very sharp, very white teeth. "You would mock me? Mock us? We could tear you apart, soft skin." "You could," Rosalie agreed, scrolling through her assignment files. "But then you'd have to explain to your commanding officers why you murdered a civilian diplomat. And I'm guessing the paperwork on that is extensive. Plus, I imagine your parents would be disappointed. Are Dralthic parents the disappointed type? Or more, the immediately disown you type? I can never keep the cultural norms straight." Nimsha made a sound that might have been a laugh, quickly stifled. Raxon's ears flattened against his skull. You are supposed to be prey. Humans are prey animals. Weak, slow, dull-toothed and soft-skinned. You should show fear, respect, submission." "Huh?" Rosalie said, finally looking up at him. "And here I thought humans were the species that figured out how to make other species' warships go boom from the other side of a star system. Funny how perspective works." Growl rumbled again, this time with what might have been approval. Or indigestion. Really, his species was hard to read. "You will learn respect," Raxon declared, though he sounded less confident than before. "We will teach you the proper behavior for prey in the presence of predators." "Sure thing, kiddo," Rosalie said, turning her attention back to her datapad. "You do that. I'll be over here filling out the daily observation logs. Apparently, I need to document behavioral patterns and social hierarchy dynamics. So, feel free to do something interesting. It'll make my report less boring." The three young predators exchanged glances. This was clearly not going according to their script. "We will demonstrate," Raxon announced, recovering some of his swagger. Nimsha, the stalking approach. What followed was, objectively, an impressive display of predatory movement. Nimsha dropped into a crouch so low she was nearly horizontal, then began moving across the training floor with absolute silence. Her body flowed like liquid shadow, each paw placed with precision, tail held motionless for balance. She circled behind Rosalie's bench, close enough that Rosalie could have reached out and touched her. Then Nimsha struck, lunging forward with claws extended, stopping just short of Rosalie's shoulder with a hiss that would have sent most prey species scrambling. Rosalie didn't flinch. She did, however, glance at her chronometer. 4 minutes and 18 seconds, she said. Not bad, though I feel like true prey wouldn't have survived the first minute, so you might be padding your numbers there. Nimsha's ears flattened. She withdrew, looking somewhere between offended and confused. "My turn," Growl announced. His voice was deeper than subsonic bass, each word less spoken and more vibrated into existence. He demonstrated what the briefing files had called a dominance display. This involved standing at full height, which was substantial, spreading, his arms wide, and releasing a roar that physically resonated in Rosalie's chest cavity. The sound was primal, overwhelming, the kind of thing evolution had specifically designed to trigger every terror response a living creature possessed. Rosalie waited until he finished, then took a sip from her thermos. "Points for volume," she said. "Minus points for duration. Any prey with functioning legs would be halfway to the next territory by the time you finish that whole production." Growl's expression, as much as his face could express anything beyond walking avalanche, suggested he had never received negative feedback on his roar before. Raxon stepped forward, clearly deciding this required the pack leader's touch. "You misunderstand. We are not trying to hunt you. We are teaching you proper responses, the appropriate fear, the recognition of your place in the hierarchy." "My place," Rosalie repeated slowly, "is sitting on this bench, drinking terrible synthetic coffee, and wondering if the council cafeteria serves anything that won't give me indigestion. That's my place. You three are welcome to have whatever hierarchy you want over there." She gestured vaguely at the rest of the training floor. "This is unacceptable," Raxon growled, and this time there was real frustration in his voice. Not anger, exactly. More like a student who couldn't understand why their homework wasn't working. "You are prey. You should respond like prey." "Here's a thought," Rosalie said, setting down her thermos. "Maybe the problem isn't that I'm responding wrong. Maybe the problem is your entire worldview is built on a binary that doesn't actually exist in reality." All three young aliens stared at her. "Predator, prey," Rosalie continued, standing up. "You've been taught that everything fits into one of those two categories. But humans? We're the species that looked at the predator-prey dynamic and said, what if we just didn't participate? We're not fast, not strong, not scary, but we're still here. Why do you think that is?" Silence. "Because we're really, really good at being unpredictable," Rosalie finished, "and at making better weapons than you have teeth." Raxon opened his mouth, probably to make another speech about dominance and hierarchy, but was interrupted by a notification chime from the training chamber's intercom system. "Midday meal period begins in 15 minutes, a flat, automated voice announced. "All trainees report to communal dining facility." "Finally," Rosalie said, grabbing her bag. "I'm starving. Come on, let's see what passes for food on this ship." She walked toward the exit without waiting to see if they'd follow. Behind her, the three young predators remained frozen in confusion. This was not how prey behaved. This was not how anything behaved. Their entire understanding of social dynamics had just been casually dismissed by a creature that should, by all rights, be cowering at their feet. "Did that just happen?" Nimsha asked, quietly. "I think so," Raxon replied, his tone uncertain. Growl watched Rosalie disappear through the door. "I like her." "You what?" "She is either very brave or very stupid," the massive Ragath continued. "Both are interesting." Raxon shook his mane, trying to reassert his authority. "This changes nothing. She will learn respect. We will teach her the ways of predators. She will understand dominance." "Sure," Nimsha said, but her voice carried doubt. "But maybe we should get food first. I'm actually hungry." They followed Rosalie toward the dining facility, a pack of confused predators trailing behind the least frightened prey animal they'd ever encountered. This, Raxon thought, with growing frustration, was going to be more complicated than anticipated. The communal dining facility was exactly what Rosalie expected. Enormous, loud, and smelling like a zoo at feeding time. Long tables stretched across the space in orderly rows, each one occupied by clusters of young predators from dozens of species. The noise level was somewhere between active construction site and small war. Rosalie grabbed a tray and approached the food dispensers, scanning the options with growing resignation. Everything looked either raw, still moving, or suspiciously gelatinous. She eventually settled on something that might have been plant-based, or might have been synthetic protein, or might have been a building material. Hard to tell. "You eat that?" Nimsha asked, appearing beside her with a tray loaded with something that was definitely raw meat. Very raw. Possibly still warm. "I eat whatever won't kill me," Rosalie replied, "though I'm keeping my standards flexible." They found seats at one of the tables, the three cubs naturally falling into their hierarchical arrangement with Raxon at the head. Rosalie sat down wherever there was space, completely ignoring the social dynamics at play. "So," she said, poking at her meal with a fork, "how long have you three been training together?" Raxon straightened, clearly pleased to be asked something that allowed him to demonstrate status. "We have been a pack unit for 6 moon cycles, selected from our respective academies for advanced training. We are among the elite." "That's nice," Rosalie said, taking a cautious bite. It tasted like nothing, which was probably the best possible outcome. "And what exactly are you training for? Besides intimidating cultural liaisons, I mean." "Command positions," Raxon explained, his chest puffing slightly. "Leadership roles in our species' defense forces. The Maw of Dominance trains the future military elite. Only the strongest, most dominant individuals are accepted." "Right, of course," Rosalie said. "Because nothing says effective military leadership like teenagers trying to out-growl each other." Growl made his chest rumble sound again. Rosalie was starting to suspect it was actually a laugh. "You mock what you do not understand," Raxon said, but there was less heat in it than before. More like rote recitation. Dominance hierarchy is essential to pack cohesion. The strongest lead. The weak follow. This is nature's law. "Nature's law," Rosalie repeated thoughtfully. "You know what else was nature's law? Getting eaten by things with bigger teeth. Humans decided that law was inconvenient, so we invented spears, then bows, then guns, then orbital bombardment platforms. We're not big on accepting laws we don't like." Nimsha tilted her head, studying Rosalie with those unnervingly focused eyes. "Your species has no pack structure? No hierarchy?" "Oh, we have hierarchies," Rosalie said. "We've got hierarchies based on money, hierarchies based on who knows what, hierarchies based on who can talk the fastest in meetings." We've got so many hierarchies we had to invent therapy to deal with the stress. But we don't base them on who can growl the loudest. Then how do you determine leadership? Raxon asked, genuinely curious now. Rosalie considered this. Usually, whoever wants the job enough to deal with the paperwork. Leadership positions come with a lot of paperwork. The cubs processed this in silence, trying to fit it into their worldview. Their meal was interrupted by a commotion from across the dining hall. A large, older Dralthik was making his way through the tables, flanked by two equally imposing bodyguards. Other diners moved aside, showing clear deference. The visitor's uniform was more elaborate than the standard training academy issue, marked with insignia that suggested high rank. "Who's that?" Rosalie asked. Raxon's ears went flat. "General Malthorne. He commands the forward fleet. He is here for inspection purposes." The way Raxon said it made clear that inspection purposes was code for making everyone miserable. Malthorne approached their table, his golden eyes sweeping over the cubs with obvious disdain. "Raxon, still wasting time with your little pack, I see. Have you shown them the meaning of true dominance yet? Or are you still playing games?" "General," Raxon said stiffly, his posture screaming discomfort. "We are following the training protocols." "Protocols?" Malthorne snorted. "When I was your age, we did not need protocols. We fought. We bled. We learned our place through pain." His gaze slid over to Rosalie. "And what is this? You bring prey to the dining hall now? Are we running a petting zoo?" The nearby tables went quiet. This was apparently high entertainment. Rosalie looked up from her meal, met Malthorne's eyes, and said in a tone of absolute boredom, "I'm the cultural liaison. I'm here to observe the training program and report back on whether the council's funding is being wasted on teaching teenagers to have staring contests." The silence that followed was profound. Malthorne's expression went through several interesting transformations. Shock, rage, and something that might have been respect fought for dominance on his face. "You dare address me with such disrespect? I'm addressing you the same way I'd address anyone who walks up to people trying to eat and starts making comments about petting zoos," Rosalie replied, "with the appropriate level of enthusiasm, which is 0. Growl made a sound. It started low in his chest, built in volume, and emerged as something Rosalie had never heard from him before. A bark of laughter. Actual laughter. He immediately clamped his jaws shut, looking shocked at himself. Nimsha's shoulders shook. She pressed a paw to her mouth, but a sound escaped anyway. A giggle. High-pitched and completely inappropriate for an apex predator. Even Raxon, despite his obvious terror at disrespecting a superior officer, couldn't quite suppress the quirk at the corner of his mouth. Malthorne stared at them, then at Rosalie, then back at them. "You find this amusing? This prey creature insults your superior? And you laugh?" "Actually," Growl rumbled, his voice still carrying traces of amusement, "it was kind of funny." Malthorne looked like he'd been physically struck. He drew himself up, preparing what was probably going to be an extended lecture about respect and hierarchy and the old ways, but Rosalie cut him off. "General, with all due respect, which at this point is very little, these kids are trying to eat. You've made your point about how tough you are and how soft the younger generation is. We all got it. Very impressive. Now, maybe you could take your crisis of relevance somewhere else? There's a whole ship full of people you can feel superior to." The general's bodyguards tensed, clearly unsure if they were supposed to defend their commander from verbal assault. Malthorne himself looked torn between rage and complete confusion about how to handle someone who simply refused to acknowledge his authority. Finally, he pointed a clawed finger at Raxon. Your pack unit will be evaluated in the upcoming Rite of Dominance. I will be watching, personally. Let us see if your training has prepared you for real challenges. He stalked away, his bodyguards hurrying to keep up. The dining hall slowly returned to its normal noise level, though many eyes remained on their table. Raxon slumped in his seat. You just made an enemy of one of the most powerful military commanders in the Dralthic fleet. Yeah, well, he started it, Rosalie said, returning to her meal. Besides, what's he going to do? File a complaint that the scary human was mean to him? He could make our evaluation impossible, Raxon said quietly. The Rite of Dominance determines our future placements. If we fail, we return to basic training. All of this, wasted. Rosalie paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. Wait, he can actually sabotage your testing? He is a judge, Nimsha explained. One of 3, and judges have discretion in their scoring. So he can tank your futures because he's got hurt feelings? That is the way of dominance, Raxon said, though he sounded bitter about it. The strong do as they will. We accept this. That's not dominance, Rosalie said. That's just pettiness with better marketing. Growl was still making small rumbling sounds, aftershocks of his earlier laughter. The look on his face, though, worth it. Easy for you to say, Raxon snapped. You're not pack leader. The failure falls on me. Then maybe stop worrying about falling and start figuring out how to succeed, Rosalie suggested. What is this Rite of Dominance thing anyway? A test, Nimsha said. Multiple challenges, hunting, stalking, combat, intimidation. We must prove our dominance over opponents and environments. Sounds straightforward enough. It is not. Raxon's ears drooped. Each cycle, half the participating packs fail. And with Malthorne as a judge, our chances have just dropped significantly. Rosalie studied the 3 young aliens. They looked miserable, defeated before the fight had even started. It reminded her of graduate students facing thesis defense committees that had already decided to fail them. Okay, she said finally. New plan. You want to pass this test? You're going to need to stop thinking like predators for a minute. All 3 looked at her. You're so focused on dominance, on showing strength, on growling louder than everyone else, that you're not thinking strategically. You're not adapting. You're just doing the same things every other pack does, only maybe a bit louder. That is how one succeeds, Raxon protested. Superior strength, superior skill, superior dominance. Is it, though? Because from where I'm sitting, you're all equally matched. Similar training, similar abilities, similar approaches. So what makes one pack succeed where another fails? Silence. I will tell you what it is not, Rosalie continued. It is not growling. It is not posturing. It is not any of the dominance displays you've been practicing. Because everyone can do those. They're expected. They're boring. Then what? Nimsha asked. The unexpected, Rosalie said. Humans did not survive because we were the strongest or fastest or scariest. We survived because we were the most creative, the most adaptable, and the most stubborn. When something did not work, we tried something else. When we faced something bigger than us, we found ways around it, under it, or through it. And when all else failed, we laughed at it. Laughed, Raxon said flatly. Laughed, Rosalie confirmed, because fear is a choice, and so is despair. But you know what really terrifies predators? Prey that refuses to be afraid. Growl's rumble had shifted from amusement to contemplation. The human makes a point. We do what is expected. Expected things can be predicted. Predicted things can be countered. Exactly, Rosalie said, pointing her fork at him. You want to beat Malthorne's evaluation? Stop trying to impress him with how good you are at being textbook predators. Show him something he has not seen before. Like what? Nimsha asked. Rosalie shrugged. No, idea. That's your job to figure out. I'm just here to observe and occasionally point out when you're all being idiots. This is ridiculous, Raxon muttered, but he did not sound entirely convinced. We cannot just abandon our training. I am not saying abandon it. I am saying supplement it. Use your predator skills, but do not let them define you. Think bigger than I am scary. Therefore, I win. The three cubs looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. We should return to the training chamber, Raxon announced, standing abruptly. We have much to discuss. Sure, Rosalie said. I will be there in a bit. I need to file today's observation report. As they left, Rosalie could hear Growl saying, She is definitely insane. Completely, Nimsha agreed. I like her, Growl repeated. Rosalie smiled into her terrible synthetic coffee. 3 days into this assignment, and she had already caused an interdimensional incident, insulted a general, and possibly corrupted 3 young predators. The council was definitely not getting their money's worth. Or maybe, she thought, they were getting exactly what they needed. The next few days fell into an odd rhythm. The cubs would attempt their various dominance displays and intimidation techniques. Rosalie would respond with complete indifference, or worse, constructive criticism. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. It started with Growl. The massive Ragath was practicing his threat posture, the one where he reared up to his full height and roared. Impressive, certainly. Terrifying, absolutely. But also, as Rosalie pointed out, extremely slow. Any prey with eyes can see that coming from 3 territories away, she commented from her bench. You are telegraphing your intentions like you are sending a message via signal fire. Growl paused, mid-roar. How else does one intimidate? Quickly, Rosalie suggested. Or not at all. The scariest things are the ones you do not see coming. He considered this, then tried a different approach. Instead of the slow rise and dramatic roar, he simply snapped to his full height in an instant, silent and sudden. Rosalie actually flinched. Better, she admitted. Nimsha had been working on her stalking technique, trying to perfect the silent approach. She was already excellent at it, but she kept trying to make it more elaborate, more obvious in its perfection. Why are you trying to look like you are stalking? Rosalie asked. That is the point, Nimsha replied, confused. To demonstrate stalking prowess. But if you are actually hunting something, you would not want it to know you are stalking it, right? So why practice looking like a perfect stalk? Why not practice actually being invisible? Nimsha's ears went back as she processed this. Then she tried again, this time without the dramatic crouch, without the exaggerated silence. Just natural movement, unremarkable and utterly forgettable. She appeared next to Rosalie's bench without Rosalie noticing her approach at all. That, Rosalie said, looking up in surprise, was actually terrifying. Well done. Raxon resisted the longest. He was pack leader after all. He had the most invested in the traditional ways, the established hierarchy. He continued his speeches about dominance, his elaborate displays of authority. But even he could not ignore the results the others were getting. One afternoon, after a particularly ineffective intimidation display, Rosalie finally said, "You know what your problem is?" "I am certain you will tell me," Raxon replied, clearly frustrated. You are trying so hard to look like a leader that you have forgotten to actually lead. Leadership is not about being the loudest or the most threatening. It is about being the one people choose to follow. They follow me because I am dominant, Raxon insisted. Do they? Rosalie challenged. Or do they follow you because that is what they have been taught to do? Strip away the hierarchy, the protocols, the expectations. Why would Nimsha and Growl follow you? Raxon opened his mouth, then closed it. He genuinely did not have an answer. Figure that out, Rosalie suggested, and you might actually become worth following. That evening, Rosalie noticed Raxon talking quietly with Nimsha and Growl. Not commanding, not instructing. Talking. Listening. Actually considering their input. It was, she thought, progress. Small progress, sure, but progress nonetheless. And when Growl made another one of his rumbling almost laughs at something Nimsha said, and Raxon did not immediately shut it down, Rosalie allowed herself a small smile. Maybe these kids were going to be okay after all. Or maybe they were all going to fail spectacularly, and she would be reassigned to some council backwater office processing forms for the rest of her career. Either way, it was going to be interesting. The shift happened gradually, like ice melting in spring. One moment, everything seemed solid and unchanging. The next, water was flowing in directions nobody expected. It started 3 days before the rite of dominance. Rosalie was reviewing training footage on her datapad when she heard something odd from across the chamber. A sound that did not belong in a facility dedicated to producing apex predators. A sound that was, frankly, inappropriate for the maw of dominance in general. Giggling. She looked up to find Nimsha attempting to suppress laughter while Growl stood nearby, his massive frame somehow conveying sheepishness, despite his complete inability to look anything other than terrifying. "What happened?" Rosalie called out. Growl attempted a stealth approach, Nimsha managed between giggles. He tried to hide behind the sparring post. Rosalie looked at Growl, then at the sparring post. The post was perhaps 1/3 his width. "I was testing a theory," Growl rumbled defensively, "about using minimal cover." The theory being what, exactly? That if you believe hard enough, physics stops working? "Something like that," he admitted. Raxon approached, and Rosalie expected him to shut down the laughter, to remind them of discipline and focus. Instead, he looked at Growl behind the inadequate post, looked at Nimsha's barely contained amusement, and something in his expression softened. "That was really stupid," he said. "Yes," Growl agreed. "You looked ridiculous." "Also, yes. Try the equipment crate next time. At least it is wide enough." Growl nodded solemnly, then moved to the equipment crate and crouched behind it. He fit, barely, but his tail stuck out one side and his head poked over the top. Nimsha lost it completely, her laughter bright and sharp in the training chamber. And Raxon smiled, actually smiled. Rosalie felt something shift in her chest. These were not just predators following protocols anymore. They were kids, learning to be themselves. "All right," she said, standing up. "Since we are apparently done with actual training today, let me teach you something useful." "More human wisdom?" Raxon asked, but there was no mockery in it. Actual curiosity. "Human humor," Rosalie corrected. "Specifically, jokes." "What purpose do jokes serve?" Nimsha asked, wiping at her eyes. "Survival," Rosalie said simply. "Humans learned a long time ago that when things get terrible, when the situation is impossible, when you are staring down something that should kill you, you have two choices. You can despair, or you can laugh. Laughter keeps you sane. It keeps you human. And sometimes It confuses the thing trying to eat you long enough for you to stab it. That is the most human thing I have ever heard, Growl observed. Thank you. Now, jokes come in different types. There are puns, which are plays on words. There is observational humor, which is pointing out absurdities in everyday situations. There is situational comedy, which is, well, Growl hiding behind that post. Hey, Growl protested mildly. And then, Rosalie continued, there is timing. Comedy is all about timing. Watch. She looked at Raxon seriously. Knock, knock. What? You are supposed to say, who is there? Raxon's ears flicked in confusion. Why would I ask who is there? I can see you standing right in front of me. It is part of the format. Just humor me. Knock, knock. Who is there? Raxon said uncertainly. Interrupting Dralthik. Interrupting Dralthik? Roar! Rosalie bellowed, cutting him off mid-word. Silence. Then Growl started laughing. Deep, rolling laughter that seemed to come from somewhere around his ankles and build upward. Nimsha joined in, high and bright. Even Raxon's muzzle twitched. That was terrible, he said. That was the point, Rosalie replied. Jokes do not have to be sophisticated. Sometimes they just have to catch you off guard, like Growl hiding behind a post that is obviously too small. I am never going to live that down, am I? Growl asked. Not even a little bit, Nimsha confirmed, still grinning. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. The cubs started making their own jokes. Terrible jokes, mostly. Jokes that barely made sense. But they were trying, and more importantly, they were laughing. Growl developed a talent for deadpan delivery. He would say something completely absurd in his rumbling monotone, and the contrast between his terrifying appearance and the ridiculous statement was comedy gold. I am considering a career change, he announced one afternoon, becoming a stealth operative. Nimsha snorted. You are the size of a small spacecraft. Exactly. No one would expect it. Nimsha gravitated toward observational humor, pointing out the absurdities of their training environment. Why do we practice hunting when all our food comes from dispensers? Are we preparing for the great cafeteria rebellion? Raxon was slower to embrace humor, but when he did, it was sharp. Malthorne says we lack discipline. This from the male who spent 10 minutes yesterday yelling at a door that would not open because he was pushing instead of pulling. You saw that? Nimsha asked, delighted. The whole corridor saw it. He blamed the door, claimed it was defective. They dissolved into laughter, the kind that feeds on itself and grows. Rosalie watched them and thought, not for the first time, that maybe the Galactic Council had understood something she had not. Maybe these young predators did not need to learn about humans as prey. Maybe they needed to learn about humans as survivors, as adapters, as species that laughed in the face of extinction and then figured out how to thrive anyway. 2 days before the rite of dominance, Rosalie found them in the training chamber long after official hours. They were not practicing intimidation displays or perfecting their growls. They were talking, planning, thinking. We cannot win by being better at the standard challenges, Raxon was saying. Every pack trains for those. We need to show something different. The humans said to be unexpected, Nimsha added. But how do you train for unexpected? You do not train for it, Growl rumbled thoughtfully. You just do it, react, adapt, like she does. She is insane, Raxon pointed out, but fondly now. Yes, but effectively insane. Rosalie cleared her throat, announcing her presence. They turned, not with the aggressive posturing of weeks before, but with the casual acknowledgement of familiarity. Working late? She asked. Worrying late, Raxon corrected. The rite begins in 2 days. We are, as you would say, underprepared. You are differently prepared, Rosalie said, joining them, which might be better. Have you figured out what you are going to do? Not die horribly, Nimsha suggested. That is a start. Aim higher. Not fail horribly, Growl tried. Better. Keep going. Raxon sat back on his haunches, looking more uncertain than Rosalie had ever seen him. What if we fail anyway? What if being unexpected is not enough? What if Malthorne simply decides we are unworthy regardless of our performance? Then you fail, Rosalie said bluntly, and you try again. Failure is not the end of the story. It is just the middle. Humans fail constantly. We are spectacular at failure. But we are even better at getting back up and trying again, usually with modifications and occasionally with explosives. That is not comforting, Nimsha said. It is not meant to be comforting. It is meant to be true. You three have spent weeks learning to laugh, to think differently, to be more than just apex predators. That will not guarantee success, but it gives you options. And options are what win fights, not just strength. Raxon met her eyes. You really believe we can pass? I believe you can surprise everyone, including yourselves. Whether that is enough? She shrugged. Find out in 2 days. Inspiring, Growl noted dryly. I am not here to inspire. I am here to observe and occasionally point out when you are being idiots, which for the record, you are not being right now. Stressed, yes. Worried, absolutely. But not idiots. Highest praise, Nimsha said with a small smile. Take it where you can get it. As Rosalie left them to their planning, she heard Raxon say quietly, I am glad she was assigned to us. Even if she is insane? Growl asked. Especially because she is insane, Raxon replied. She taught us something none of our instructors could. What is that? That being a predator is not about being scary. It is about being alive. Rosalie smiled as she walked away. Maybe, just maybe, these cubs were going to be okay after all. The Right of Dominance arena was packed. Every viewing platform held spectators eager to watch adolescent predators prove their worth, or fail spectacularly. Rosalie stood in the observation deck, trying not to look nervous. Below, Raxon, Nimsha, and Growl waited with 5 other packs. Malthorne occupied the center judge's platform, looking smug. The first challenges went as expected. 5 packs performed with textbook precision, impressive and traditional. Raxon's pack did something different every time. They used terrain unexpectedly, turned weaknesses into strengths, adapted so quickly even the judges seemed confused. Then came the final challenge. Surprise scenario, the announcer declared. Each pack will face an unknown threat. The first 4 packs faced various challenges. Some succeeded adequately, others failed. The 5th pack performed with textbook precision. Then it was Raxon's turn. A combat drone, military grade, activated in the lower arena. Heavily armed, highly mobile, completely immune to intimidation because it was not alive. Malthorne looked satisfied. This is impossible. Rosalie watched as the 3 cubs froze for exactly 3 seconds. Then Growl laughed. In the middle of an impossible challenge, with his future on the line, Growl was laughing. And then, so were the others. They have broken, Malthorne announced. Stress-induced hysteria. Wait, another judge said. Look. They moved like a team, like humans would. Nimsha observed patterns. Growl manipulated the environment. Raxon coordinated through communication, not dominance. They were not just fighting. They were enjoying it, finding joy in the impossible because That is what Rosalie taught them. Growl dropped a support beam. Nimsha disabled a joint. Raxon finished with precision. 38 seconds. Complete. The arena erupted. 2 judges scored them exceptional. Malthorne abstained, but 2 was enough. They had won by refusing to be dominated. Later, Rosalie found them in their chamber, exhausted and elated. "You did it," she said. "We did something," Raxon replied. "I am not sure what. You won by being yourselves. That is growth." Also really annoying for Malthorne. "The look on his face when we laughed at the drone," Growl rumbled, "worth everything." "It worked because you stopped being afraid," Rosalie explained. "Fear makes you predictable. Laughter makes you dangerous." "They offered you a permanent position," Raxon said. "Will you accept?" "Absolutely not. I have other places to be. Besides, you do not need me anymore." "We will miss you," Nimsha said quietly. "You will be too busy being exceptional." "You taught us something our instructors never could," Raxon said. "That the scariest predators are not the ones who roar loudest. They are the ones who face darkness and laugh." As they walked toward the celebration meal, Rosalie heard Growl ask, "Do you think humans are the scariest predators?" Raxon considered. "I think they are something scarier. They are predators who forgot to be afraid." "That, or they are insane," Nimsha added. "Why not both?" Growl suggested. They laughed, the sound echoing through corridors that had rarely heard such things. 3 young predators had learned to laugh, and in learning to laugh, they had learned to truly live. Rosalie smiled, already composing her final report. Assignment complete. Subjects exceeded expectations. Final assessment. Humanity's greatest export is not technology or weapons. It is the audacity to laugh at the universe and the stubbornness to survive anyway. These cubs tried to teach the human how to growl. The human taught them how to laugh. Mission accomplished. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And that, Rosalie thought, was probably for the best.